your battery and stuff. Have you got Bluetooth turned on?
Yes. Might get Kelly to do this. Oh, sure. Screen share. There.
You got it? For some reason, I don't see your Bluetooth icon up here. I don't know if that's going to matter. Should be able to put battery. Oh.
Well, I hate to tie up time, John. So I can speak to all this without the photos. So you can get started. I might.
Yeah.
Kelly was just at a conference. So I don't know whether. Kelly. Oh, you don't?
How to do?
You never did?
The airplane's working now there. Setting the airplane from here to there.
You've never done that before? I've never.
From a phone?
I could do it from my phone. I don't have my phone.
Oh, he forgot his phone today.
The one day I forgot.
And he went to go back, and I said, "You don't have time." And here we are.
Try this little guy up here. Airplane maybe. Alright, so exit out of that and let's go to just settings.
Settings?
Yeah, you're being here.
I should have let you do this. Display.
Why don't you just search?
He did screen.
Receiver.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll maybe Jason can. Yeah.
Are you a Mac guy?
I'm not a Mac guy.
What happened? We just want to connect it.
The OR, and those are multi-million-dollar machines, and my kids are constantly amazed how they can't work.
What is it?
Please help me.
Shall I back away?
How can we do
Yeah,
that?
that's fine.
Can't do this.
I can play with you.
That's enabled for airplane. We're
We
trying
were
to get
here,
this
we
for swing tech
were
play.
discussing Revelation 15 and 16, but part of our preamble, we talked about the name of the Sabbath school is InStep, and this Sabbath school historically, going back to the days of my father and others that were teaching, had a Sabbath school fund that they would collectively raise money that would go to various projects. And usually those projects, there were some that were foreign mission and some that were, local needs. And it was a variation of things. Some things were one-time kind of gifts. Sometimes they were ongoing. There was a mission in the Solomon Islands where they were contributing to medicine that was going to the Solomon Islands.
What is the name of this?
Monthly that they could get here in the States. So we have just over $30,000 right now in the InStep fund. And so last week I was talking to you, we have some of the class members that
Looks like he's got it.
evaluate things and look to see what kind of projects to support. And so I was describing some of those projects last week.
Thank you.
And Eric and I had a conversation afterwards where Eric was telling me about a project that I wasn't aware of, that Eric has very personal experience with because he's been there. And one of the things that we like, or historically have liked, is to support ministry in the church that our own people are involved with and know, because you can imagine that when our own people are involved, it kind of gives you a degree of confidence that it's doing what it's supposed to do. So I've invited Eric to share this mission and story and his experience and the Benton's experience. I think Sandy's here today. Unfortunately, we've we've had a ravage of pancreatic cancer in our church, and that took Mr. Benton. It's taken Cindy's mom, and but this started with Benton and their Benton ministry over in Africa, and Eric has presented this in a couple of different places, and so I wanted to give him the time to do that today. And then I thought we'll reconvene with our people again, and we haven't spent any money, so we can sort of decide kind of how we want to do, and then we'll talk more about that next week. So with that, we'll give the time to Eric.
Good morning. Good morning. Sorry for the delay.
I think everybody knows, but in case you don't, Eric is Paul and Veronica's oldest. So grew up in this church a long time.
Again, good morning. Sorry for the delay. Technical difficulties here. So we all know that we're having some challenges in the Middle East again, and we have, along with Israel, sent some missiles across to Tehran as of in the last 24 hours. So this gives you perspective on, you can see the capital of Iran here in the upper end of this slide. So this is, of course, the Middle East, but the Middle East is tied heavily into Africa. So it's quite timely and interesting. There's a lot of connections, which we'll get into. If you want a little bit of geography and history, you're going to get a little of that today. And it does tie into kind of the mission and the unique elements of this mission. So again, this is a slide showing the opposite trip, but that gives you a view. This is from the screen on the airplane of, again, the Middle East. And what we're looking at here is Eastern Central Africa. So that gives you a perspective on what we're talking about. And demographically, when we talk about Western societies, you have Japan. I'm really struggling.
It's okay.
There we go. So we all know that Western Europe, Japan, China, even China, and the United States is all growing old, growing grayer. And when we talk about the church, I think it was Pastor Andrew actually. No, it wasn't Pastor Andrew. But I think he and, well, anyway, I recall a sermon like a year and a half ago where we were talking about the challenges of Western culture and, the fact that we're losing members of the church and such, and how in Central America and Africa, the church is booming and growing very rapidly. That is the case for this part of Eastern Central Africa. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church in particular has a very strong presence in Kenya, for example, which I'll speak to briefly. And then Uganda is right next to Kenya. So this is the family. Again, a little perspective still. Barry and Sandy were gracious enough to cover my ticket, and then it kind of spiraled out of control from there because I thought it'd be a great opportunity to take my son Kai and give him a little kick in the pants and let him, again, recognize that there's people outside of all his travels to Europe that are struggling and that he needs to be of service to those people as well. My kids have been to Europe many times, and that skews the perspective of having visited wonderful places with governance that is actually functional. And so I wanted them to have that other perspective. And so I took Kai, and then of course my daughter Maya thought that was extremely unfair. And she does kind of have an ongoing challenge with that because I've taken Kai on travels more than her. And then of course, we need to take Kelly along to actually mastermind the whole thing. So she worked very hard behind the scenes to make sure we got all our vaccines and made everything happen. So I do appreciate that. So we took off, Mom took us, and we left here and went to Dallas. And then Dallas, which is, of course, going the opposite direction, we went all the way to Doha. And Doha is the capital of Qatar, and they have just been struck by Iran as well, as in retaliation for the missile strike that Israel and U.S. just made in the last 24 hours. So a lot of retaliatory measures have been taken, and some of those points in the Persian Gulf have been hit by, or at least they were attempted to be hit by some of the missiles from Iran. So anyway, we went to Doha and then Doha down to Nairobi. And in graduate school, I went to graduate school in Sweden, and after finishing at Southern, and it was an engineering and international relations program. It had a, in a sense, you're looking at ecosystems, you're looking at all sorts of processes to determine like when they fail and sort of anticipate when there's going to be displacement and challenges. And one of my projects was actually of the Nile Basin. And the Nile starts in Uganda. So it all kind of ties together. And when I got to, so backtrack a second, when I got to graduate school, I'm being located into my little small room. It was about the size of this section right here. The guy right directly next to me was a Kenyan Seventh-day Adventist. And we became fast friends. And there's a gentleman across the hall that was from Boston, great guy. And the three of us were inseparable. And we have made attempts to stay in contact. And one of our promises to each other back 30 years ago was that someday I will come visit you and our kids will get to know each other. And it still raises goosebumps on my back because it was so awesome to be able to travel. Kai met his son, who's the same age. Maya met his daughter, who's the same age. And Maya and his daughter still stay in touch, and the same for Kai. So it was really wonderful to see that connection. But Makua showed us all around Kenya. And not just the tourist sections, but we drove, and I knew about his mother. And she's a devout Seventh-day Adventist from a small town that took us 7 hours to get there. So once Kelly and Maya left, then Kai and I stayed with Makua for a couple days. And we asked him to, again, immerse us in not the tourist stuff, but immerse us in the real culture of him, his family, and his people. And so we drove to see his mother, and she prayed with us, and all his sisters were there. And you gain perspective on how important this is. Makua, his wife, she's a devout Seventh-day Adventist, and this is on top of one of the buildings in Nairobi looking out. It's a very large city. And you get to perspective on how important education is, which ties into one of Sandy and Barry's real core missions here. These young people, Makua is responsible for all of his siblings, his mother, he had to build her a home. He built himself a small house next to her house. He's responsible for all of his cousins, everybody in his family on one person's salary. And his wife works, but they together have a tremendous responsibility across their diverse family groups. And that's the case for a lot of these students that we're going to get to talking about in Uganda. And that's the importance of education. It's the importance of ensuring that they have a way to provide for themselves and fulfill their responsibilities to their family. And so that was a beautiful component to understand more clearly. As I tell Kai, I try to relay the same message, even though it's not as prevalent of a message in our culture. But Makua tells his son, this is your responsibility to me, to us, when you become, in his a responsible party of the family. And then we traveled throughout sort of the countryside. And as you're traveling, you see Seventh-day Adventist Church after Seventh-day Adventist Church, and they're relatively small. And then we saw several schools, Seventh-day Adventist schools, along with other denominations. But the school systems, of course, are really important to try to draw these kids out of a life of poverty. And that is very, very prevalent as you move through the countryside. There were some photos, with us, kind of as in family events with the family of Makua. His daughter doesn't go to Seventh-day Adventist school because there wasn't one close, but in town, in the city of Nairobi. But this is a Catholic school, and we all know that the Catholics and Seventh-day Adventists operate the most diverse, largest network of school systems in the world. And this is all out of order, unfortunately. It was in order, but somehow we got all messed up here. So after the time in Nairobi, again, like I said, Kelly and Maya left, and Kai and I got on a plane together, and this is all over the place, and we crossed the Lake Victoria, which is only about an hour, and went to Kampala, which is the capital of Uganda. And Uganda is, it's lush. Sandy and Barry told me you're going to be able to eat, fresh avocados, guava. Like it was very nice. And the country itself has been relatively stable, in part because they have an 82-year-old dictator, in a sense, who controls the country quite well, but for better or for worse. And It just so happens that we arrived the very week of a contested election. And so there were challenges associated with that, but nothing significant. Barry and Sandy have a nice relationship with our Seventh-day Adventist University, Bugama University. It's the largest Seventh-day Adventist University in all of Eastern Central Africa. And Makua actually indicated to me that a lot of the pastors at his church have come from Bugama. And they kind of, again, spread throughout Eastern Africa and service the needs of not just being pastors. There's a strong, you guys will appreciate this, those that are in the medical space, there's a strong medical science space. There's a lot of nurses, pharmacists. Again, there's a medical school. Well, I don't know about school, but there's a hospital there. I'm not sure they have a medical school, but pardon me? Yeah, but they do have a lot of nurses and applied nursing type medical services. So it's a very strong university setting, a huge campus, beautiful campus, and in a sense, this mission is tied to that campus and the students that it attracts. And what's beautiful about sort of the geography of understanding like where we're at, reference again the fact that we're in Africa, obviously not Middle East, but we're close, and there is a lot of turmoil in that part of the world. You have Ethiopia that's just north of Kenya and Uganda, and there's just in the last week concern that Eritrea and Ethiopia might get back to having an outright conflict. So there's just a growing amount of instability. And even if you just look back at the historic last several months and years, you all know that Sudan and South Sudan split. There's an ongoing conflict there, which has all created a lot of refugees. That instability has kind of then naturally sent people and students down into a more stable place. And Uganda is one of the most stable governments in that area. For better, for worse, again, controlled by pretty much an authoritative individual. But it does create stability. The university is there, and there are a lot of young students coming from, as refugees in a sense, coming from South Sudan, Sudan. There's one or two individuals from Rwanda, and there's actually few of the students that I interfaced with were from Uganda itself. And again, Rwanda, South Sudan, there's a lot of students, Sudan, and then Sandy and Barry have a family that they've been supporting. Joseph has earned his medical degree, was a shining student in that program, and he's from an area that's north of Sudan along a mountain range that's between Sudan and South Sudan. And it's a very unique people that have very long, historic ties, and they've kind of never they've never been directly aligned with either government, so they basically, unfortunately, fall outside of either of those two countries' willingness to kind of provide them formal documents, which is one of the challenges that Joseph has. But ultimately, what I loved about this opportunity is the connection globally to an unstable part of the world, the fact that it ties to a need for stability within these young people's lives. And Barry and Sandy have provided, education, room and board, and that plants them in our, again, large university setting. They also established, and this was mentioned last week, what's the accountability? What's the certainty that this money is going to people who are making a difference? All that's, Barry was, he was in the military, in the CIA, he's an attorney. Barry and Sandy didn't set this thing up just to hand out money willy-nilly. They created a great structure around it. And he even used the word Rangers to basically designate, in a sense, like a set of standards he expected of his students. They needed to have excellence in academics. They needed to be honest. They needed to fight grift and corruption, because there's always an element in that in all society. But in Africa, there's kind of an underlayer of kind of that element of any workings within society. And he just did not want to tolerate any of that. And he wants to train people to go back out into their communities and fight that, which is beautiful. And that's what you need. And when we think back to the demographics conversation, the young people are a huge wave that's going to move through the pipeline, not just of society, but of the economy of Africa. And that's in part why there is so much instability, is not just because of the minerals that we want from Africa, it's also because we want to be able to control kind of the economic opportunities that exist there. And that ties into my conversation about the Middle East, because the Middle East is also sending a lot of their revenue to set up shop and set up businesses in Africa. So that Africa is a very unique place for us to focus, in part, like I said already, because we have a strong Seventh-day Adventist presence there. The church is growing. There's a lot of young people, and those young people then go back into their communities, whether it be their church, their own community with family and the economic prospects and job opportunities there. But they will go back and again spread that concept of accountability and academic excellence back into those communities and be a support of their families. And so it will basically, in a sense, on multiple levels, break the tide of like poverty. It will break some of the grift and less than honorable sort of dealings that occur in those societies. It just has a really transformative effect across the board. And that really came out in these conversations. So again, pictures are completely messed up. But I will show you a photo of, I'll try to go backwards here. So this is us leaving the Kampala airport at the start of our time in Uganda. And you'll see these black military vehicles. That was an effort by the current 82-year-old to prevent the other party from setting, actually getting to a rally. So he was trying to mess up the ability to campaign ahead of the election. But we did make it through, got to the university campus, which was secure. It's a large campus, Sandy. I think it was like 600 acres. And again, Sandy and Barry had a nice compound that was reserved, and the rangers, as they call them, which is kind of the cream of the crop, are part of their program, and then they can invite friends that they feel like are good assets to the group, and they can all meet once or twice a year in what they call the Parliament, which is an effort just to pull people together. It's formal, but it's not overly formal, but people are assigned tasks to present. I was assigned some tasks to present on certain topics I chose. But the idea overall is just to present a sense of professionalism, a sense that there's a tie back to the funding sources in the states, that there's accountability to us in that sense, that we're going to be checking and we're going to be collaborating. And then the head rangers, which are in a sense, I don't know whether Barry and Sandy directly named them, but there's like 3 or 4 that are kind of in a sense like the head of the Alumni Association, if you want to call it that. And they're in charge of ensuring that some of the financials are held accountable in real life in the field by giving some feedback. And there's a whole like accountability setup associated with that. But Kai got up, he gave some presentations on his engineering classes because, again, when we talk about, of course, the upcoming need for trades and such, there needs to be people that are getting their nursing degrees, getting degrees that can actually go back and serve their communities. And they wanted to know a little bit about what's engineering like in the States. And Kai was able to present to that. And they all loved him. Once he got up there, he did I think 2 sessions. And we have breakout sessions. And they all huddled. And Kai was not able to look at his iPhone because the internet was cut off. There were some power outages, all a bit challenging for me because I was trying to operate a business. But ultimately, it was good. It forced us to be more present, and it was particularly good for Kai. You can see here, well, I won't get into that till later, but there's some key people in this photo, and Kai ended up, taking photos with people. They just really, the kids just kind of really, not kids, these young men and women really kind of latched on to him because he was their age. And they felt like, they could connect with him, and they had long conversations, which is really key. And when we talk about our kids, this would be a great opportunity to meet, honorable Christian young people in a Seventh-day Adventist setting, and basically start to understand better what other people face in the world, which is why I wanted to take Kai initially anyways. But this is kind of a nice little area that they've reserved right on the campus. And we had multiple days there. I think there were 4 or 5 days. and we had presentations with the students. This is just a small, sort of, again, select group of people that Barry and Sandy have curated over the years, some of which have graduated, and they come back to provide presentations and to, in a sense, coach the next group. And then there's younger students, some of which are, juniors or seniors, or just wrapping up their nursing, just wrapping up engineering. And it was, again, a really solid group of people. And I really, really enjoyed it. They do have, Sandy and Barry have Lowell is a gentleman's name who has worked, he's a long-term missionary, and he and his wife is here on the bottom left, and he and I gave presentations throughout along with others. He has helped Barry and Sandy kind of like, again, maintain some of the connection to these groups. I think Lowell actually identified Joseph and other students over the years as being, the cream of the crop. And so that's been a long-term partnership. And as we continue to go through this disjointed presentation, we have, again, I don't know whether you know Joseph, but Joseph, again, goes to the other Sabbath school. He has his medical degree. He's trying to sort through the challenges of passports and the governance issue between South Sudan and Sudan. These are all his siblings. His sister here is on the far right, and she's wrapping up pharmacy. And then he has all his brothers. You can see this brother here in the middle. He and Kai had some great conversations. They connected well. And again, Sandy Bear supporting, in a sense, the whole family at this point as they, again, are getting educated and will then go back to, again, this very unique part of Sudan between South and the primary state of Sudan. The idea being that someone like Joseph would go back and serve the medical needs of his community, because there's basically, I think, only one other doctor in that area, and they desperately need medical assistance. And they need not just a medical provider, but they need a leader in the community. And Joseph is a respected man. He has education. He's also very, very much deeply, he very much deeply wants to give back to his people, his community. And they know that, but the challenge right now is just trying to get him back and getting the kind of the details of travel worked out. So it's unfortunate, but he is stuck here right now. But the goal is, just like the other goals I mentioned for all these students, is for them to learn to be honorable, learn the concepts of being a good team player, good citizen, and be educated and be able to go back to their respective communities. Here is a gentleman who is an engineer, chemical engineer. This is, again, Joseph's sister, who's a pharmacist. This guy here took all the banana leaves, or the dried stalk that you'll see here hanging from the banana trees. He figured out with his other engineer students how to just grind them, add a binding agent, and then create sheets of certain thicknesses. Again, you got to think through, like, how much weight is this bag going to hold? But he basically came up with an alternative to a plastic bag that you get from Publix or Kroger's. Because plastic in Africa and other parts of the world, once you make it, it's not going to disappear. It's going to end up on the side of the road in a ditch. So in Kenya, you actually get fined if you have plastic bags, because they know that they just don't want that plastic all over their streets. So he figured out a way to create an alternative to that. So it's genius, super smart. And the other thing that kind of came out with our conversation last week is, what are I think it was Chris that asked this, how certain are you that there's going to be some legs? Like, is this going to be something that's going to have the ability to move forward? Or are my dollars just going to go into a black hole, and I'm going to help someone for a certain amount of time, and then when the money dries up, there's no ability for this to move forward on its own. So there was an interest. Barry always had an interest in making sure that he was encouraging people to go into fields that would be of service, but also would be of service long term. Like, that there's all concerns about AI taking certain jobs. No one's taking, the job of a nurse in Africa anytime soon. And these career paths have been thought through as long-term career paths, He also encouraged people to have ways of which to give back with businesses, like this gentleman, the engineer. Get you up here, Sandy. And this guy is working with his classmates to develop a company that's going to produce these bags. So these are, again, banana fiber bags from the grocery store. You can buy them now in some of the high-end grocery stores in Kampala. So the business model is already working. And then there's other ladies who have other side businesses, and they're encouraging people to start thinking of ways of supplementing their income. Sandy and Barry have been gracious to jumpstart this, to front load this, but they're always encouraging people to recognize that they need to think of ways in which to support themselves and ensure that there's some sustainable future there. And that's a good thing that was mentioned in in last week's presentation. We took a lot of different supplies in our suitcases. I did take plastic bags, not thinking the whole thing through. But when you think about what they need, we want to provide them some religious materials. We also want to provide them some practical materials. I took like 50 bamboo toothbrushes, and again, thinking about the waste cycle, trying to like give them an opportunity to think through like how can they reduce their waste, because all that stuff just basically ends up in a ditch. I took them toothpaste tablets that you simply just pop in your mouth. There's no plastic, there's no tube. So we kind of like introduced them to some of those ideas, and I'm not sure why toothpaste tablets aren't like prevalent in those parts of the world. It seems like it makes perfect sense, but they had never seen it. And so ultimately, they were like, oh, how can we import these? Well, we don't necessarily want you to import. That's going to, that's not going to be good for the trade balance of your small country. Like figure out ways to, be inventive and come up with these products and produce them locally. So I think, again, there's a lot of stuff. I'm sorry for the early technical difficulties. The photos have somehow fallen into a complete different mix. I'll just randomly go through a few more and we'll get you up here, Sandy. This is, again, Joseph's sister. I had all these, I mean, my dad, of course, and my mom. My mom thinks she's a doctor too. They have tons of medicines, and I took lots of stuff, and then Kelly organized it. And I said, at the end, I remember Barry telling me, just take all this stuff, leave the bag of all the religious materials and anything else you want to take. And towards the end, you started to be bitten by the bug, in a sense. You sort of understood how amazing this program is, how unique it is. And I invited Joseph's brother. Again, I said, okay, I opened up my suitcase with all my fancy Bonobos shirts and pants and shorts and all my favorite clothes. And I said, you can have them all. And I think, again, you saw the picture. There's like 6 brothers. So I figured, whatever size I am, they'll figure out how to move it between the group. And we ultimately had a great time, and we handed everything back. And I think now Sandy wants to speak to, you like this one?
With,
With Kai? Yeah. Yeah, this is Alex. And Alex, he's doing sports medicine.
yes,
Yeah.
that's what he wants to do.
And yeah, he's trained in sports medicine, but actually Bugama is, correct me if I'm wrong, but Bugama, I think, is trying to formalize their soccer program, and then he would be locally employed by the Bugama as their sports medicine guy. So again,
Let me
turn over to
also
Sandy.
Here, just a minute. We do have a 501c3. The name of the organization is Abba's Work, and it's been functioning for more than 11 years. The original student was Joseph, how many of you have seen Joseph at church or heard him up front? A few of you have. He's an amazing young man, and so there's just so much history there and all that, but I want you to know, we would like to see this organization go forward. It's got to come into the 21st century. We're in the process of setting up a web page. Joseph actually is in the United States. He's living in Lebanon and working over there, but not in Madison. That's for another conversation. But, well, I lost my thoughts. So I'll just tell you, the goal of Abba's Work is to create Christian leaders, and we believe that education is the avenue to change. And so we're trying to help these young people get what they don't normally get in college. Barry has thousands, literally thousands of emails and texts where he has communicated with Joseph and all of these other young people to teach them. So Barry was the first, before COVID, Barry was in Africa twice a year doing Parliament, and he always took interesting people and people who, we all have such a different life than they do. Every single person sitting in this room has something they can share with the Rangers. And so, 3 or 4 days all together, eating together, that's Parliament. It's like going to a seminar, folks, with people who are so hungry to know more. And how can I survive? There are 1.6 million young people moving into the job market in the next 10 years across Africa. That's a lot of young people. And there are just hardly any jobs. So they've got to be entrepreneurial. They've got to do this themselves. And what Barry was trying to do, and me, was to raise them up and give them opportunities for new skills so that they can carry those forward into their communities, for their nation, this was not a low bar. This was a high bar. We want you to change your communities and your countries, period. And so that's what we were trying to do. And
It's going to happen too.
Yeah.
I mean, you're already seeing some of the people start to take leadership roles in the Seventh-day Adventist Conference,
Right.
in the government. So it's already happening.
That's true. There's one young man who's just as bright as Joseph is, and he's getting a CPA in Uganda. He will be a certified public accountant in Uganda. He's about 2/3 the way through that process. Hallelujah. I mean, he has what they call letters, tests. There are 18 of those. Well, you all know CPAs. You know that they've had lots and lots and lots of tests they've had to take. Well, the same's true in Uganda. Uganda is the most stable country in that part of the world, period. And it runs decently well. So, yes, ma'am.
Andy, how
Yes.
much does it cost to put a student through?
Great first question.
How much to put a student what?
Financially, how much does it cost to put a student through one of these programs?
Through 3 years of college. Theirs is 3 years. They have a bridge program for the first year, so it's actually 4 years. It's costing about $6,000 or $7,000 per year for one student, and that provides them with their education, food, place to live. They get computers, they get iPhones. They all know how to get around on those, and they have them. That's been part of the model that we've set up, is they needed the tools that every student needs, whether they're in Africa or here. They've all got to have these things. So we have been providing those for them. And it's been amazing to watch them. Yes.
What size is the university and what size are the Rangers?
We've served probably 80, give or take a few, over these 10, 11 years. And let's see, what was the other thing?
Size of the university.
University population or number of students. I do not know, but they have a variety of offerings. Theology is one of them, but they have many other things.
Are most of them Christian?
Yes.
The
In fact, I have one girl who left her Muslim home in dread of losing her life by her father because she had become an Adventist, and she got herself somehow to Uganda, and we picked her up, and she is finishing her nursing degree in May. It just is phenomenal. And she rescued a sister of hers who was only 13 who was going to be forced to marry so she's been able to bring her into Uganda to.
This is her.
protect
This is her right here. It has the Ranger
Yeah.
shirt on.
Yeah.
I think it's about 4,000 students.
Thank you for that. I've never asked that question. Now I know too.
Yeah.
Any other
The
questions?
Ranger group, that 4,000 is about
Oh,
how many?
handful. At the most of any of the years prior to COVID, we would have 20 to 25 students that we were supporting with all of these things that we've talked about. Right now, there's currently 17 that we're supporting, and they will, by attrition through graduations, they will move on in the near future. But if Abba's work is going to work and continue forward, then it has to have more coming in. And Barry's standard was the best of the best. We want to find the students who are already showing a lot of promise, and move them into this program and teach them things that college doesn't teach you.
And like John and I mentioned when we were speaking, John, I mean, there's this beautiful standard that you're speaking to, Sandy, and that is pervasive. Like everybody, not just the Rangers themselves, you have the alumni of the program, then you have the current students, and then you have the friends they invite.
Right.
And they're all consistently sort of communicating this high standard of quality. It's really good.
It's not unusual to have 50 or 60 people at Parliament meetings because everybody on campus knows who the Rangers are. They want to be there. They would love to be picked up by Abba's work. And so they come and they get to at least get a taste of the visitors, what they have to offer during that time.
How's the selection made?
Well, Barry was the master of that.
Personality tests?
Personality tests. He was there twice a year, and so he would sit down with these students and just check them out. He was good at doing that. We have also accepted students that other students have brought to us, but we've had a chance to vet them through parliaments and meetings. When COVID happened and then Barry's illness, it became impossible for him to be there as frequently. But I'm going back in January. Jolene and her little girl Lena are going to go with us to Uganda, and this will be a parliament. And I don't know who all is going to come. Jolene was with us about 3 years ago, and she was so impressed with some of these efforts that the Ugandans were making to help people of disabilities. Now, you saw this young man who is has dwarfism, but he's smart, guys. He's smart. That doesn't mean you're not smart. And so he wants to be a nurse. He's gotten part of the nursing done. Not finished with nursing, but that's what he actually wants, to be a physician. Whether that can happen or not, I don't know, but we'll see. But Jolene and John have been supporting him in this effort, trying to get him along, learning new skills all along. Very your 30s, folks, are not for getting married, they are for learning skills. And you might have enough sense by the time you're 30 to select an appropriate mate.
And to our earlier conversation about encouraging other entrepreneurial activities, Alex took Kai right down the street from the Parliament to his home where his family is, and he has goats, and he has a whole business model in his head, and he's activated it. Like, he raises the goats, he knows how much the milk can be sold for, he knows how much the goat themselves can be sold for when appropriate, and that helps supplement his income as well. Yep.
Right. So it's just been quite a journey. And we just would like to see this go forward, but I can't do it alone, obviously. And Eric and others have stepped up to visit, help out. I'm very grateful for that. You just have to see how God's going to lead us.
And I think Dr. Beach, you asked about, the vetting process, and as the answer, as Sandy answered it, I mean, there was this sort of natural talent that she and Barry had, but ultimately, there'll have to be a little bit more of a formal structure created.
Yeah.
And I think what's beautiful about the alumni of the program is they have been vetted by Barry and Sandy over these years, and so they can serve as a natural group, sort of peer group, to help with that effort as well. So they have this rich sort of central, again, we talked earlier about how they're going to go back and be leaders in their community, and that will occur, but there's still quite a lot of the alumni kind of in the local area that are still present to help with. So I think there's obviously a need for structure, and there's a need to provide some formal vetting mechanisms, and they have a way in which they capture the grades, and they hold them accountable by sending information back to Sandy. So that's all in place. There's going to be a need, of course, for more funding. That's just kind of a natural component to all of this. There's dollars needed to help these students. When I left, they were asking for email addresses, text, and WhatsApp. And it was all sort of a natural, loving sort of exchange. But then again, you recognize that there are requests. There's been one or two requests per week of saying, hey, is there any ability to help with such and such and such and such? So those are kind of ongoing. And the challenge, of course, Sandy and I speak to each other, we have to have a way to kind of vet that. And I want everything. I'm not in a position right now because of the lack of capacity to get super involved in the daily administrative tasks. And I don't want to start giving them the impression that I'm going to somehow be creative and somehow send money. It needs to go through the structure of a nonprofit. And that's what's beautiful about the fact they have that already set up.
One of the things we're doing real quickly is we're trying to bring this organization into the 21st century with a web page. We've not had a web page before. And we're also tracking all of this through spreadsheets. Joseph is actually setting that up currently. So that part is moving right along, and I have a date with a web designer coming up, and I've already met him once, and I know we need to do that. We cannot have this organization go forward without a face on internet. Yes.
Yeah, so what, I'm still trying to piece together Abba's work with the university and what the funding model is that's keeping all everyone anyway.
Okay, the funding model has been donations, primarily Barry and I for these little more than a decade. And the university really appreciates the Rangers, but we don't take any funds from them whatsoever. We're on a mission to create leaders, and college doesn't always fill in those holes between what you learn in your classroom and your life that you came from. So we have no administrative responsibility whatsoever to the university, nor do they to us.
So you're just more or less, Abba's work is more or less selecting the top candidates and augmenting their education with
Correct.
leadership concepts.
Correct.
Great summary. Yeah.
They cannot afford to go to college, and they will go back to their communities. Joseph is anxious to go home, anxious to go there, and he is blocked by immigration issues right now. But they'll go to their communities, and they will be leaders, and we want them to be Christian leaders. We want them to plant those seeds. So.
And it's kind of like, it was a great summary. I would think of it like an honors program at a university campus. Again, like Sandy said, though, it's not tied directly to the administrative bureaucracy of the university, which is actually kind of a good thing. But it's an honors program. And like already mentioned, very, very much through all these exchanges, both site visits and through all the emails, he very much was impressing on them professional development. And that's above and beyond anything the university provides.
Guys, I know we're running out of time, but if you have more questions, we'll hang around.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for listening.
With your permission, I'd like to talk about the domestic Eric topic.
Oh, no, what's that?
4 years ago, I confiscated from the railroad a 8x8 shed that we installed at the farm to make a cook off. Eric came up and insulated the entire inside. Well, fast forward to 2026, Eric is going to furnish the insulation and install the installation of the concessions. Yesterday, George and I sealed the concrete, so we're ready to start the frame. So, George and I and the whole staff at the academy are looking for more areas.
I don't know about that. Kelly's like, no, you don't want more Erics.
There's two ways to do it: money and time. We'll take either. Either is
Either one.
just as important.
Oh, my goodness.
Keep that in mind for the domestic end of your giving situation.
Perfect.
Thank you, Dave. All right, thank you for coming. We'll